Right. Happy Monday, everybody. I'm Adam Gordon. I am CEO at Candidate.ID, and this is our talent talk. We do probably one every 2 weeks. And this week we're doing one slightly earlier in the day in the UK with our friends Will from Cielo Talent. Will, would you like to just give yourself a quick introduction?
Yeah, hi everyone, and thanks for the intro, Adam. So Will Innes, I'm VP at Cielo. I've been with the organisation about 4 years. I recently moved out to Brisbane, Australia, where I've got a role to help grow our Asia Pacific business.
Terrific. Okay, so we're going to be talking today about intelligent talent demand generation. Demand generation is a slightly fancy way of talking about talent pipelines and talking about how you go from turning everybody that you want to hire into people that are kind of queuing up to come and work for your organization. So there's a couple of processes that we can go through in order to make this happen. And Will and I are going to talk through a very specific one that we did together with a company called Dialog Semiconductor. So some of the key things about talent demand generation, we're going to talk through the fact that the candidate journey is really changing and how you can adapt, because it's not as simple as it was in the past. If you want to hire the best people in the market, then there's a couple of ways that you can go about driving demand and not just relying on the people that are applying to adverts, for example. Technology can do heavy lifting in 2018, and I personally believe cold calling is futile. So I'll talk through a little bit about that. And as my colleague Scott says, there's gold in them there hills, and we'll talk about how you can make really good use of your ATS. Another way of talking about this is waking the dead. Most large employers and agencies, in fact, have got big candidate databases that they do not use as their first port of call when it comes to hiring, creating shortlists. So, when I started in recruitment in 1999, and actually, Will, I've never asked you this question, but I think from LinkedIn we're exactly the same age. We certainly left school in the same year. Anyway, when I started working in recruitment, recruitment marketing could make candidates aware about opportunities, but then to go through the education, the consideration, and the decision phase, they needed to do that themselves. So when I say recruitment marketing, back then, it was really just an advert in a newspaper or a magazine. Today, however, candidates can go through the awareness, the education, and the consideration phases on their own. So they can see an advert in the awareness stage, they can, or a LinkedIn post or something like that. To educate, they can go onto a careers site, and to more deeply consider, they could go onto Glassdoor, they could go onto the hiring manager's LinkedIn profile, they could even go into the hiring manager's Facebook page, and they do. So they don't actually need to talk to a recruiter until much later in the process. And it's the same way that we today go about buying a house or a car or a holiday. We used to go into travel agents. We used to go into car dealerships. And we don't really do that so much anymore. We find out what it's like to drive that car online first. We save ourselves a lot of time. And simple as this, we don't want to talk to salespeople. So if candidates want to do all of this self-directed research online, what I recommend is, for sure, you give candidates plenty of information that's going to help them come through the journey themselves, and they're going to be educating and more deeply considering on your content. Now, for me, the key thing is that 80% of people are in the awareness phase. They're not ready for a conversation. They may not even be in the awareness phase, but ideally you want them all in the awareness phase. And they don't want to see your employer brand. They probably don't even want to see your job descriptions. They don't really want it. They don't want any sales messages. But if you can give them certain types of content, which we'll explain in a second, then you can really build goodwill ongoing.
Yep. Do you want me to talk to this?
Do it. Yeah, absolutely.
It was interesting. In fact, going back to this one, since it's a bit of a sidebar, which I hope you don't mind, but looking at those funnels, that I think it's interesting to think that you could say, well, as a recruiter, maybe you have slightly less to do because the candidate can self-serve. But I think there's an interesting conversation here about the role of the recruiter in this, in that they now need to understand this digital landscape. They need to understand the sales and marketing process that candidates are going through, so they know the moment to interject. So I don't know. For me, there's just an interesting sidebar about the role of the recruiter in this and how they need to understand how this relationship's completely changing. Because I love that analogy of the car sales role. I mean, I went car shopping recently. The same thing. You turn up, you know the engine, you know the make, the model, the color. Actually, the only bit you're going in for then is the paperwork, which blockchain will end up solving anyway, and the relationship point of view. So this funnel piece is completely transforming the way talent acquisition is working, and the professionals within it as well.
Yeah, and what that means is, and it's happening. I'm hearing it regularly. People are saying to me, "Look, what should the right shape of my recruitment team be as a result of this? Because if we need less people to be reaching out to candidates cold, because we're able to identify much more information about them through the journey that they're taking, and marketing is doing the heavy lifting, then does that mean that I maybe need less people interviewing candidates and more people maybe setting out journeys and doing the kind of recruitment marketing bit?" And I can see it in most our customers a lot of them are Fortune 500 type size organizations, and they are pretty much all doing this. They're changing the shape of their team as a result of the fact that the candidate journey's changed.
Yeah. Interestingly, there was a lady from Australia Post today on LinkedIn who said that her success completely changed when she started bringing marketing capabilities into her team. She posted that in sort of public comment, which I thought was just a really interesting piece. It's just that shift is happening right now to both the candidate and how organizations are setting themselves up to deal with that as well.
Well, one other quick sidebar on that is something I've really noticed is the difference between now. I'm interested to know your perspective in Australia, because recruitment marketing is actually a pretty mature discipline in the UK. And I think there's a lot of businesses that have had internal recruitment marketing teams for quite a long time. And certainly there's been a lot of specialist recruitment marketing agencies for a long time. I worked for a company called Havas People between 2002 and 2004. And that company still exists and is a pretty big recruitment marketing specialist company. In the USA, I'm absolutely sure that recruitment marketing is not nearly as mature, because they much more regularly convert recruiters in the middle of their career into moving them into employer brand and recruitment marketing. And they don't really do that so much here. And here in the UK, for sure, people probably move into recruitment marketing much earlier in their career. Australia, given there's a real close link between the UK and Australia, I think Australia is probably a bit more like the UK, but I'm interested to know if that's your perspective.
No, I think so. I mean, the industry has changed a lot in the last few years. I worked here 10 years or so ago, probably more so, in the recruitment agencies, recruitment marketing agencies. That market's changed considerably, but just a bit like in the UK, you've now got smart digital social marketing agencies coming through, really challenging those established practices. You've also got in-house specialism where employer branding and marketing teams sit alongside sourcing and talent acquisition. So yeah, I think it's really similar to that kind of UK, albeit at a slightly different scale, but the same kind of migration of skills. And also I think understanding that marketing is a really core component of what talent acquisition needs to do now in terms of brand activation and candidate experience, absolutely going in that direction as well.
Absolutely. Okay. Sorry, one quick thing I should have said at the start. If anybody's got any questions or wants to make any comments or wants to agree or disagree or anything like that, just post it in the chat
Yeah.
Rather than ask a question, post it in the chat, and we'll absolutely answer any questions or address any challenges. Will,
Excellent.
today's candidate journey, the flight of the bumblebee.
Yeah, I like the way you called it this. So I saw some, I think it was Broadbean research about a year or two ago, which said that candidates are now looking at, I think it was 14 and a half sources of information before they apply. And it just shows, that now what it used to be, again, 5, 10 years ago, was you post an advert, really simple. They might look at your website, but you get your applications and we all know the process and they're in. But actually what we're seeing now is that it's a much more fragmented ecosystem. If candidates are looking at 14 or so, you can bet your bottom dollar that organizations aren't managing all 14 of those touch points really neatly. And I think that's probably the whole point, is that you can't manage that entire ecosystem. Sure, you can build personas, you can build content, channel plans, but one of the biggest challenges of that sort of bumblebee pathway is that you can't actually track, and certainly it's been very hard over the last couple of years, to track candidates through that entire ecosystem. You've got different technologies not speaking to each other, data privacy, people starting on one device and then are finishing an application somewhere else. So it's been really, really hard to manage that entire sort of bumblebee journey. And I think what we're starting to see now is technologies and aggregators that are bringing that together. And in fact, that's one of the reasons we were so interested to partner with Candidate.ID on this, is to think about how can we do this in a more sophisticated way? How can we create really valuable user journeys that are actually going to reward through this journey, and put some controls and factors around this flight of the bumblebee, because it's here to stay, and one that we need to work with for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, because it's so unpredictable, and it's my colleague Scott that calls it the flight of the bumblebee. A bumblebee's pathway is so it's really unpredictable. So it goes into
Absolutely.
a flower, and it hovers out the flower, and then you've got no idea which direction, and it doesn't know. It just does it. So, and that's the way we use the internet today, isn't it? It's the way that I use Wikipedia, I use Quora, I use YouTube, and I go onto YouTube, and I can end up sometimes half an hour later on something entirely different from the way that I went in there. But if we can make sure that there's plenty of there's a real sort of digital footprint out there, that we have a digital footprint out there that's going to answer ideally any question that a candidate has, and ideally in any format that they want that the answer in, then that's absolutely brilliant. Anthony's got a question which is about how prevalent is Glassdoor in the journey. My view is that depends on how prevalent Glassdoor is in the country that you're in. So in the USA, for example, Glassdoor is vital. Glassdoor is an American organization. And it's actually not now. It's now a Japanese organization, in fact, because they've just been acquired by Recruit Holdings from Japan. So it's, I think that what that's likely to mean is you're going to see, because American companies tend to focus on their home market. So, but now it's owned by Japanese business. I think you're going to see a significant expansion of Glassdoor's importance. For sure, in the UK, it's important. It's pretty mature here, and people will go onto Glassdoor and take a look at what others have commented on. But my caution on that would be, for a candidate, certainly would be, bear in mind, the people that tend to put up good or bad comments tend to have had either brilliant or terrible experiences. And actually, most people don't comment. Most people don't comment on things like TripAdvisor either. So, but I certainly think it's important, because it's user generated, so it's authentic.
Yeah,
Will,
I can't believe it's not. Absolutely. That if you make the analogy to consumer behavior, it's exactly the same. You wouldn't buy a car if everyone said it just wasn't reliable. So you're right. I think there is people take things with a pinch of salt. Disgruntled people have way more to say than happy people. I think, we all know that. But at Cielo, we talk about dimensions that we know to affect applications are around reach. So how far you're reaching to the market, who you're knowing, experience, so the experience you're giving, and the reputation. So we put it as one of the three main pillars. And I think it's a Glassdoor statistic, right? So you might even take this with a pinch of salt. But the other dimension of this is they say, I think it's 62% of candidates would have a more favorable view of organizations that engage. So I think where the Glassdoor piece is going is not just around the label that people give you, but the quality of your interactions, the genuine nature of your interactions, and transparency and trust. So I think it's the doorway into a much bigger conversation. Right now, probably still a bit of pinch of salt, but very much the future of peer reviews and things like that. I'd say huge. And if companies want to be on it, I think you need to be listening, but more importantly, you need to be engaging. And with the right governance structures and those sorts of things and escalation processes, it can absolutely be done and make a really positive difference to reputational scores. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So to adapt to the changing candidate journey, I've created this, what I call a candidate nurturing content map. So if you think about candidates in the 4 different stages of awareness, education, consideration, and application, I believe that if you can segment the different channels and formats and content suggestions that you could serve to candidates. Now, using certain types of technology, like using Candidate.ID, you can automate that. So we can understand that Will prefers content through email, in a video format about industry insights, whereas Adam likes content through social media in an infographic format about career advice. So if you think about the candidates in terms of different stages of the journey, then for most people, 80% according to LinkedIn are not in the market for an opportunity. So don't be selling them anything. Don't be giving them, probably not even your employer brand at this stage, certainly not job descriptions. But if you're giving them things, we know from the data, if you're giving them content which is going to help them with their career, it's useful and it's relevant and it's going to help them with their career, then candidates want that, even if they're not in the market. Going into the education phase, this is more employer brand. This is when candidates are starting to think, that organization could be interesting to me. So they want to find out a bit more. Then in the more deep consideration phase, that's when they're likely to start using things like Glassdoor, and they start going to look at things like the hiring manager's LinkedIn profile. And that's when you can be more proactive about sending them. I mean, it might be, depending on the kind of market you're in, it might be that at that point you're sending them one-to-one communication. Now, you also need to consider that which candidates have got a journey that's changed. Is it people who are choosing between working in McDonald's or KFC? And the answer is probably no, because they're unlikely to prioritize research around their career. They're probably looking at factors like, is the salary going to be different if I go and work there? For the types of people that are going and doing 14, I heard from Boston Consulting Group, it was 16 different pieces of, but somewhere between 14 and 16 different pieces of research online. Those people are probably going to be what I call qualified volume. So it's unlikely to be sort of people working in call center or retail or hospitality or construction. It's more likely to be people that work in offices, basically. Now that's a generalization, complete generalization, but it's what I call qualified volume. They're the people that can and are likely to prioritize going and doing that kind of online research. So I mean, hopefully this is quite an interesting piece of content, and it's not relevant for every organization. You would adapt it for your own, but it gets people kind of thinking about how would you go about taking people through the funnel.
Yeah. And I like this. I mean, I think it's a great framework. I've built sort of similar stuff, over the years. What I find interesting is then, of course, what's next, and we're going to talk about that in a sec. But in previous years, you would have done something quite like you'd have had 2 or 3 pieces of content for awareness, a couple for education, a couple for consideration, and of course, realistically, you never really knew whether you were pushing someone through the funnel, you'd always kind of assume that, well, because I've now had this kind of engagement with them, you would go to the next. I think what's exciting about this new era of technology is actually knowing how people are reacting to this, what to do next, and actually automating this whole piece. So we've gone from something that was quite manual and quite uncertain of how to calculate things like ROI and performance to something that's just way more enhanced. So it's, exciting times. And I'm glad we're moving from frameworks like this into stuff that really does make a difference.
Yeah. So so to make more sense of this, so you've created your kind of candidate map. What you want to do is layer on top of that a scoring model. So this is just a sample scoring model. Down in the bottom, you'll see these are channels and formats. So if somebody's looking at email, which is bottom left, then it's going to score low. Whereas if they start looking, if you go along to the right, things like video or white papers, then that's going to score higher because basically they're deeper into the content. Down on the left-hand side, this is kind of content itself. If somebody's looking at industry news and they're not looking at anything else, then that's fine. You continue automatically serving them with industry news. And using Candidate.ID, it will know that Will is only interested in industry news because he's never looked at anything else. So Will goes into a stream for just getting industry news. If the candidate starts to look at things like up at the top, like your career-focused event or your job search or your job description, typically that's going to score much higher. That's going to score much higher because it shows that they're deeper into looking at what's it really like to work there and exploring opportunities. Now, one nuance that we find quite interesting is your scoring model will vary according to which job disciplines you're targeting. So we can see in this example, second top on the left-hand side is job description. That's deemed to be sort of 9 points, basically, if somebody looks at it. For a technical kind of candidate, like a software engineer, somebody like that, then by the time they get to a job description, they are pretty much ready for a conversation. Whereas if a salesperson looks at a job description, they're just benchmarking. That does not mean they're ready for a conversation yet. So we would mark that as a much lower points added when a salesperson looks at a job description. So over time, you become quite aware of what different candidates' journeys actually mean, and it does mean a different thing according to the behaviors of different types of job families. What do we have? So one thing that you just said, Will, was about we're in an era now where content and technology can really deliver you candidates in a way that's more powerful than it was before. So here's an example. So most organizations that are trying to nurture talent today are using CRM to do it. And this is not a slight on CRM at all, because CRM technology does a load of things that are valuable and basically vital. However, the one thing it doesn't do quite so well is nurture candidates. And that's why this is really only now just becoming a really important discipline, this kind of nurturing candidates, serving a personalized journey, creating talent pipelines. So up at the top, you can see using CRM, you've got 200 candidates. And let's say a lot of them are like John, who opens an email and interacts with your content. According to a CRM, John basically what you'll just see is John's opened an email, pretty much. Whereas if Jane has opened an email, interacted with your content, looked at your careers page, your culture page, looked at the hiring manager on LinkedIn, looked at the job spec, and then looked at it again, according to CRM, there's no real difference between John and Jane. The CRM does not know that Jane has done all of these different activities. Using Candidate.ID, for example, and I know this is a bit of a sales aspect to what I'm saying here. John opens an email, clicks on your content, and then does nothing. John's on 2 points, whereas we can track that Jane has done all of these different things, and the balanced scorecard kicks in, and you can see that Jane is on 37 points. So according to Candidate.ID, if you've got 200 software engineers, it's likely that 190 of them are like John, who in the last week have not done very much, and maybe 10 of them are like Jane, who have done all of these different activities. You spend your precious human time picking up the phone, contacting one-to-one all those Janes, and that saves you a huge amount of time. And this is what I mean but when I said earlier that cold calling is futile. It's not a complete waste. However, there's ways that you can really give yourselves the information on who to pick up the phone to.
Exactly. Yeah, quality. I'll talk a little bit about Dialog.
Well,
hi, you still there? Sorry, because I can't see you. I don't know what I'm doing.
Oh, sorry, yes, go for it.
So this is a little bit about how Cielo worked with one of our customers, Dialog, with Candidate.ID. The clue is in the name, right? So they're basically a technology company. They put the technology into things like smartphones and devices. Really cool company. Not necessarily, unless you're in that space, you may not have heard of them, which is one, I suppose, small opportunity as a recruitment challenge. But generally, they don't have problems hiring because of the nature of the work they do, the highly innovative technical business. But there was an interesting rhythm to what they do, which is basically that they get busy when a manufacturer requires a whole lot of new materials. They have to ramp up, put new technologists and engineers in place to basically fulfill the order in very simplistic terms. So what they observed and noticed was that they would have sort of peaks and troughs in hiring, and often it's the repeat roles. So they were going out sourcing advertising for the same kind of roles each time. Let's say, for example, every 7-8 months, there's a hiring campaign. And what they noticed, of course, is that they're getting really well qualified candidates because you can either kind of do the job or you can't. So what they were noticing is that they're gathering all of these great CVs, all these data sources, great people in their ATS, but it was on a cycle. So it was working, it wasn't broken, but what we were speaking to them about was how could we be more innovative with how we're approaching that as a business? How could we do that smarter? And I think the opportunity also there, and I think why I'm particularly excited about this for the ANZ market as well, is thinking actually the challenge they have is that a legacy ATS isn't a sort of searchable, useful piece of kit in some respects, in that they had this data, but they couldn't do much with it. So the opportunity was to think about how could we be more innovative? How could we really drill into that data and make sure that we're speaking to the right people at the right time, rather than just riding these peaks and crests of activity. So what you see here is the start of the funnel. So where we started is with just under 3,000 people in the overall talent pool within the ATS. And then what we did over a 4-week period, which is running up to the red line you can see there, is actually start to drill down into the marketing. And actually what we're starting to do here is, just as Adam's talked about, is the scoring mechanism. So what you can see is the funnel getting narrower and narrower as we qualify and cut down people who are moving towards being hire ready. And again, if you think about that content funnel, you can see underneath where we started was quite high level in terms of thinking about the industry, the company, thought leadership, putting out feelers, who might be interested when our hiring is about to come into play. And as people engage, the content gets more meaningful, and it's more laden with career drivers and more sort of hooks and calls to action. So you see the numbers went down quite radically, down to 500. And then people are starting to be what we termed as meaningfully active. So we're more into like the company culture, the team. We're starting to get people excited and again, checking for their engagement and starting to qualify them down. We ended up in the 300s. And at this red line, this is really when our recruiters started to step in. So this is the Cielo recruiters on behalf of Dialog, actually starting to engage real-time, face-to-face, getting people booked into interviews. And so it was up to 300 over a 4-week period. And then for the rest of the period, so it was only a 6-week period, you can see we took it down to 15 hires. So it's not necessarily sound like a huge number, but this is 15 software engineers within a 6-week period, all from data that existed within the client organization's ATS. And there's all sorts of side implications. I mean, there's some hard benefits, right? So 15 hires, and if you look down the bottom right, it's still in sterling. So £10,000, about 16, 17,000 Aussie dollars, which gets the cost per hire down to about $1,000 over a 6-week period. So the cost savings versus, using agency, advertising costs, absolutely huge savings there. But I also think, and I don't know how much you sort of major on this stuff, Adam, but I think some important implications here around things like candidate experience. If you look at the Candy Awards and things like that, the big one is you're not communicating with me enough. You're not giving me enough chance of feedback. Or some of the time delays of people hearing responses are so vast that, again, it starts to impact reputation. What you've got here is fast, mobile-enabled, well engaged, speak to me when I'm ready, and then a high-touch service delivered by Cielo in this instance. And then you're in, you're interviewed, you've got all the information you need, you get your offer, you accept, you're in. I think it's a great customer experience as well. Customer, candidate, and the cost savings, I think, speak for themselves. So it was a really interesting, kind of like, it was a pilot for us really with Cielo, wasn't it, Adam? Thinking about which of our customers were open to this kind of thing. And it was, we learned absolutely loads from it. Like I said, you got the cost benefits, but also those kind of really, really significant things like candidate experience.
Absolutely. So Anthony's asked a question. He's concerned about the feasibility of talent pooling in a post-GDPR world. And is this talent pipelining model compliant? So there's two aspects to that. The first is, if you can show that candidates are interacting with you, you can claim legitimate business interest as the legal basis for retaining their data on your database. Incidentally, all the terms around GDPR, all the process around GDPR, it's going to become really familiar in our vernacular. And what I mean by this is that it's actually much more simple than a lot of people have been talking about. If you can show that candidates are interacting with your content, they're opening your emails, or they're looking at your career site, or they're engaging with your social media, then you can keep their data on your database. So if you use a product like Candidate.ID that allows you to track and score all of this interaction, and you are serving candidates with content that they want, then they will continue to interact. So if they continue to interact and you can track that, then you can show that they should stay there. If you're serving them stuff that they want, they're going to interact. Bear in mind, however, you are competing with Netflix, you're competing with the Daily Mail, you're competing with Facebook, you're competing with everything that's online. But we know that from our data, if you're giving things to people that are useful and relevant, they're going to want to continue to interact. Now, I'm not sure about any other products, but using Candidate.ID, you can certainly suppress a candidate's details, suppress a candidate's data and record at the point that they've been inactive for a defined period of time. So if you're really conservative, that might be they've not done anything for 6 months, so they become invisible to a human within the database. Or it could be 2 years. They're automatically suppressed at a point of 2 years if they've not done anything at that stage. What I mean by suppressed is they go into basically a hidden room within your database whereby a human can't access it. The reason you don't hard delete them is unless they ask to be deleted, specifically use that word. You don't delete them because one of the paradoxes of GDPR is if you delete somebody off of your database, how do you know in the future that they've been asked to be deleted? So if you go to re-add them again, then you want to kind of know that. So the unique identifier probably needs to be the email address. But actually, Anthony, this is something that's much easier to do than you would think. And I'll be talking about this a lot more over the next year for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll just show a couple of these. I mean, there's a few of these slides in here, I think, Adam, but these are just some examples of some of the content, the things that went out at different stages. So one of the things I would draw out from here is that we sent these with a named person from within Dialog, Alex, who was one of the directors. And I think that in itself was really powerful. I mean, we all know from engagement surveys and all those kind of things that leadership's really important, but certainly in technology roles, and actually I'd probably say for a number of those sort of professional level roles, the personal brand, reputation, and networks is just going to be a huge part of recruitment marketing, employer branding, talent attraction in the years to come. So I mean, we at Cielo, we do a lot of work with hiring managers, improving personal brand, because I think, Adam, you mentioned this earlier. It's exactly what candidates are doing. Who am I going to work with? Is this person going to teach me something? Do they have recommendations on LinkedIn? So the power of this coming from an engineer was really, really powerful. And you can see we've highlighted some of the things in here, so I won't put my finger in front of the screen, but we're actually starting to give people various calls to action, which of course are all trackable, but we're trying to give ultimately some value to the candidate here. So the example is here that we're at that top level, we're giving information about the kind of things that we value around here. So we're helping people think, okay, am I going to match? Am I going to suit? And we're directing people into various bits of the website. I think the next example we had, again, slightly warmer now. So again, we're giving people the opportunity to engage. And it's a bit of a personal note. I believe engineers get ahead of work. They've also given some work examples as well. So they're giving live examples to make it more visible and real. So here's some examples of the technical work we've done with digital SLR cameras. We're helping people feel it's a little bit exclusive. We're looking to bring in the best talent in the industry. We know that things like peer groups and networks are really valuable to, well, every type of talent, but especially digital as well. So it just gets warmer and warmer, lots of calls to actions, and just hits the buttons that we planned. And we know that we're going to be able to score accurately to move people and understand people where they are in the funnel so that we can serve them up even more valuable content and nudge them further along.
Will, could you just go back to that? Sorry, Will, could you just go back to the one before a second?
Yeah.
So one thing that I've noticed about this one is, so these, as I understand, some of the candidates might have been on the database for up to 3 years without any contact, up until this point. So they've been very, very transparent about why they're making contact. So the subject heading actually says, "First email from me, Alex Tavares, Engineering Director at Dialog Semiconductor." And then that opening line is, "We haven't spoken before, but Dialog Semiconductor have had contact with you in the past," which is just to remind them and to kind of set the scene. And I wanted to reach out and share some of the things I think are important right now. So because it says in the subject heading, "First email from me," the candidates know that this is going to be a series that's going to come out. And the way that it just starts off with almost it's a kind of quasi apology for not having been in contact. And this person's basically saying, "Look, I'm picking up the baton to reach out to you and share some things I think are important." So it was. I think that's a really pretty impactful way of doing things.
Yeah, I think the tone is really important. Yeah, it's not just, it's not we talked about sales, but this is ultimately it's about value for the candidate and helping them choose if it's right for them and the finding the right ones through the funnel. I mean, it's a matching exercise, right? But yeah, it's carefully worded and constructed, but ultimately it's got to provide something valuable. Small sidebar, but I remember I've done quite a lot of hiring of digital talent in the last couple of years, and it's a bit of a buzzword, right? But I remember doing research and asking people who are currently doing the role in various businesses, what would it take for you to share some of our marketing materials with people? And I think ultimately it's got to be, it's got to be, and I think they said, it's got to be cool, it's got to be funny, and it can't just be the usual corporate speak. Have you thought, do you sort of operate in that environment at all, Adam, thinking about how you get people within the organization to share content as well? Because that's an interesting dynamic here. I mean, here specifically, we're talking about an ATS, and I don't want to derail the conversation, but how does that kind of sharing and network activation play into how Candidate.ID might work in this kind of environment?
Yeah, it does. And we've actually integrated with a couple of products that make it much easier for people to share things. So
Okay.
a couple of examples would be Pazel, which is a product that allows people to easily kind of top and tail. If they find something online that they really like, all they do is they click the Pazel extension, Chrome extension button, and then add in a little, like just a couple of sentences to explain why they like that piece of content. They then choose which social networks they want to share it on, and that automatically embeds a candidate ID tracking link, which means that it's really easy for people to then share that. Another one that I think is pretty easy to use is Spark Start, which is it makes it really easy for hiring managers to create short videos, kind of 30-second videos that get attached to a job description and can get attached to other recruitment-related content. So I mean, I am constantly looking at what tools are there that help make it easy for people to share content. Of course, however, when you make it easy for people to share content, does that make them lazy? And does it mean that they share less, self-generated content, less authentic content? So there is a question mark about that. But I know that this is something that you've been looking at as well.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing for me is that actually, I think you said the word lazy. I know what you mean. Is that the content's still going to be really great? I think I think I've heard some really high-profile people saying employer branding's dead, those kind of things. I kind of get that, but actually, I think there is a massive place for creativity. At the first stage, you need to spark interest in people, and if you're going to talk about sharing content, I mean, one of the biggest things on if you can get your own organization sharing content, you're unlocking an enormous potential talent community, but they're only going to do it if the content's really good. And what I'm keen for, I mean, these things like these emails are really well constructed and they're well written, but I just want to make sure that I'm communicating the fact that they're not just sales documents full of just like hooks and calls to action. Is that I want to make sure that when we're using this as an organization, that we are putting out really interesting, valuable content, not only personal pride, but secondly, I know it works more. The numbers will tell you that, a creative something versus a not so creative something. But equally, if you're going to get your organization sharing content, they've got to have a sense of pride in it. And they've got to think, my network is either going to laugh at this or love it or be rewarded. And that's a massive part of this, I think, is that it's not just about the machine automating everything. It automates part of the process and it makes us smart, but we mustn't take our eye off the creativity and inspiration that's really, really key in all forms of marketing. Just a personal rant on that.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. What we find from data is what we've found so far is that if candidates feel like they're going to get something useful and relevant from that content. They'll continue to engage in it. And actually, something else that people find quite surprising is email is actually remains across every customer that runs Candidate ID. Email remains the number one channel that drives the most demand, the most engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. Another example here, I mean, we probably want to give some time for questions and some of your closing slides, but the other thing that was important to say, you might want to talk more about it, was that the whole system is built for, well, you say candidate first rather than mobile first, but it's got to display really well in every single device, because again, people pick up Gmail on the train, on the way home, then they're looking at an iPad whilst they're watching TV later. And I think the way the experience renders to people is really, really key. And certainly we saw that across the data for Dialog, right? And you can actually see what people are looking at the devices on, whether they're applying, all the calls to action. It was really mixed across the devices, wasn't it?
Yeah, and what we find is typically, not just with Dialog, but with other employers as well, candidates will tend to open those kind of emails, or it might be through text message or something else. In fact, just quickly, this what we find is, I said that email it drives the most demand. A simple workflow within here is send all the candidates an email. Anybody who doesn't open the email, automatically send it to them again, like schedule to send the same email to them again with a different subject heading 3 days later. If they don't open that, automatically have the content go out to them through text message. And we find that with every extra way that you go about squeezing more value out of that content, it does build up a bigger proportion of the candidate database as being active. So it's absolutely normal for Candidate ID users to have sort of 75% engagement rate with a campaign, because you've done the email, you've done the subject swap 3 days later to anybody that doesn't open the first email, you've used text message, you can then potentially use social media depending on the integrations. But what we find is that candidates tend to look at things on their, if it's like top of the funnel content, so awareness, or maybe going into the education phase content, they tend to do that on a mobile. But then once they start to get more deep into the content and they want to look at things like, they want to look at job descriptions and that kind of thing, they tend to go on a bigger screen. Absolutely. They tend to go on a laptop or an iPad or something like that, because they feel like they're not going to miss anything. Whereas on a mobile, you're not, people still today, you're not guaranteed you're going to get everything on a mobile. You might get a reduced experience. So that's why we need to bear in mind that they're probably going to go across device. And the component that Candidate ID uses to track candidates across devices is called fingerprint, and it looks at things like, what's the candidate's what device are they on, what browser are they on, what operating system, what's their precise location, what is their screen resolution, and there's about 20 different clues that it brings together to really hone in on that one individual, even if they're going across devices. So it's quite intricate, but very powerful. So this is just an example of a screenshot whereby, of course, the candidate names are all redacted on the left, but you can see it's got name, email, location, stage, and then points, and you can see 254, 241. This is an example of candidates. This is just one screenshot. Of course, it goes right down. There's thousands of people in this particular instance, and here's an example of the kind of information that you're looking at. So this is Dialog example. This is a candidate at Dialog. So you can see down at the bottom, the candidates opened an email. They got 1 point for that. They looked at a landing page, got 1 point. They looked at a blog about connectivity, got 3 points. Looked at a landing page, got 1 point. Then looked at current vacancies, got 3 points. And then looked at the specific vacancy, principal analog design engineer. The alert goes to the recruiter to tell them that this candidate's taking a look at the job description. They can see if the candidate applied or not, and then they can pick up the phone to that candidate. They can pick up the phone to that candidate if the candidate hasn't applied. So if you get an alert that tells you 10 candidates have looked at the job description, and you can see that 4 of them applied, you know which 6 people to prioritize picking up the phone to. And what our recruiters that use Candidate.ID tell us is they can see that the people they phone, they often say, well, I looked at that job description, but I'm not quite ready for a move. However, it looks good and I want to talk again in 3 months. Or, which is great information, or I looked at the job description and I wasn't quite sure how to get to your office, or I wasn't quite sure what the salary is, or I wasn't quite sure how much time was spent traveling in the job, or some other really simple question that they need an answer to. And once the recruiter knows that that's just what they're looking for, they can give them that simple answer and they can really achieve influence and convert more candidates. So the combination of being able to filter by the engagement score, so you can see who's on the highest engagement score, then going into the candidate's record and seeing exactly what they've done, it means you know what to say to them. So on this example, they looked at that principal analog design engineer vacancy, then looked at landing page, then looked at benefits, got 8 points for looking at benefits, and looked at a press release about power efficiency. So the recruiter could pick up the phone to the candidate and say, I'm calling to talk to you about some of the things we're doing around power efficiency, and also about the principal analog design engineer, and a bit further up, the senior analog design engineer vacancy. So they know what to say to the candidate when they make that quasi cold call.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that kind of intelligence made a huge difference to our teams as we went through it.
So what if you know in real time, if you know really fast what a candidate's doing, it's really, really useful. So this is just an example from my own Slack channel. And we set this up just as an example, but we can see in my Slack, this person's requested, this is on our own, obviously, Candidate.ID, request a demo page visited by this person, Crawford Davidson. But our customers or Candidate.ID users are getting emails or text messages or into Slack or into other channels, a message to say that a candidate's looked at a job description, or they've filled in a form to say they want to have a career conversation, or they've done something. So you can be really really creative about the way that you serve up hot leads to your recruiters.
Yeah.
Great. Will, if you want to click stop sharing, I think that we could. Let's see. We've got 4 minutes. Thanks for. So just so everybody's aware, Will was able to, even though this is my show, Will was able to do the screen share on those slides, and I wasn't for some reason. I mean, I have started this quite early, and I've started on a laptop that's at home and rather than in my work. So, I mean, yeah, look, I think it's been quite an interesting. The dialogue examples are a really interesting one, and we find that RPO businesses are really enjoying this way of doing things because they often have the internal team from a marketing perspective and a technology perspective that's able to run this type of program, whereas an internal team often doesn't have quite enough people, perhaps, and it's about manpower, and it's about the skills that you can take from one customer example and take it into other customers. And that's one of the reasons why I think RPO as a sort of segment within recruitment is a really growing one, and why RPO businesses are often able to land this type of initiative. Just in terms of your kind of other customers and internationally, because you've worked internationally with Cielo on customers. I mean, what are the sort of main reasons that customers are working with a business like yours? I'm basically teeing you up for a sales pitch here.
I was just going, well, I think you've already landed it. It's the fact that we can assemble an integrated team probably more quickly and probably more cost effectively than an internal team. That I would literally, you share an office and you've got brand, technology, recruitment, all of that in one room, or virtually, but you can mobilize that really quickly and seamlessly in an integrated way. And I know from working with organizations, they just can't do it that quickly. So I think if you can do that, show your value at a fair price, I think it's a decent service, you know, and it can, I think people can get value from that.
Okay, if anybody's got any more questions, Mark Mansour's commented, "This looks sexy," which is good, a term I like to describe it. If anybody's got any other questions or points to make, please do share them just now. Will, just on a slightly more general note, anything else that you've seen in the market in terms of processes, ways of doing things, or technology that you're really excited about right now?
On the careers website side, I think there's a huge opportunity for organizations to leapfrog their competitors. I'm going to be doing quite a lot about that in ANZ in the coming weeks. We've got, yeah, again, you teed me up nicely, sorry, but yeah, I think careers websites are a huge area that we can really move organizations forward. You think about that ecosystem, the website sits in the middle, and I think it's going to play a huge role for the next couple of years. And yeah, in ANZ and Asia Pacific more broadly, I think there are some big opportunities for customers to make some inroads there.
Right. So if you want to talk about career sites, then make contact with Will, who's clearly got some expertise in this area. So finally, I just wanted to say, Will, thanks so much for joining me and taking the time to do so. For all the people that have signed in, I hope this has been quite interesting. Feel free to make contact with Will or I if you want to talk about talent demand generation, creating talent pipelines, and look out for our next talent talk, which actually I think is just tomorrow, and it's probably middle of the night where you are, so you can look at the recording, and it's all about talent acquisition transformation. Will, unfortunately, when I click end broadcast here, we're going to get cut off. So I'll talk to you at some point, probably tomorrow. And thanks very much, everybody, for coming and joining us. Bye for now.
Bye.